You are now listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. On today's program, I want to talk once again about the technology that is expanding with lightning speed all over planet Earth and all over the United States. Essentially, what I want to focus in on is AI, or artificial intelligence. AI, or artificial intelligence, is bringing about sweeping seismic changes in the landscape of American society, culture, business, employment, jobs, bureaucracies, anything you can think of that used to be done by bureaucrats and laborers at various levels of responsibility. We are on the edge of massive sweeping changes. Now, I'll bring up a brief story that I probably mentioned to you, but it needs to be repeated because in this very brief story, it summarizes what I believe my challenge will be and your challenge will be concerning artificial intelligence and human beings like you and I having to interact with AI or artificially intelligent bots of various sources. So as I shared with you a while back, I don't remember what the reason was. You know, when you try to call a credit card company or any company that you unfortunately have to do business with, you inevitably are stonewalled by an endless series of barricades where you're deliberately bumped around from one person to another, one department to another, in what I believe, and I don't believe I'm paranoid, in what I believe is a strategized psychological wearing out process, where no matter how much energy you had when you began the process, and it usually involves you getting access to what is rightfully and legally yours. Like, let's say you misplaced a credit card, and I didn't, but you have to say that in today's environment. I didn't misplace a credit card. Because, by the way, this conversation that we're having together right at this exact moment is being, as a matter of routine, machine read, which means the auditory, verbal, written content is being recorded in vast metadata centers, no matter what anybody tells you. And it's being recorded for whatever reason. And so everything you say, whenever you say it, is being recorded. And so you need to know that. And also that you never know what other AI device, what other bot, algorithm, robot, or whatever electronic or digital entity, you don't know who it is that's listening to you, analyzing you, and sending the content of whatever information to somebody. And that doesn't sound all that bad. And at a certain level, it wouldn't sound all that bad, except for the fact that human employees are notorious for making mistakes. Yeah, we all deal with it. So not only are human employees notorious for making mistakes, but added to that is the fact that AI, or artificial intelligence employees, are equally and sometimes worse at making mistakes. That will change. They will become more accurate as time goes on. So you are going to run out of energy, because the name of the game is, theoretically, it should be a simple process that you call your bank if you have a problem with your credit card, lost, missing, stolen, or whatever the problem is. It should be a simple matter if you have been banking at a particular institution for any reasonable period of time. It should be a simple matter that you could call them and get whatever problem, assuming it's not involving large sums of money or whatever. It should be a simple matter of you calling them and them making whatever the necessary adjustment is so you can use your credit card or whatever service you're interacting with whatever corporation for. But you and I know from firsthand experience that that is not the way it is. And so usually a lot of people, they're smart, they're calm, they go into it in a somewhat serene manner. And my hat's off to you if that happens to be you. But a lot of other people are anticipating the potential rudeness, the stress, the dehumanization of your interaction. What I find is the most bothersome is that I'm going to end up talking and asking an electronic entity for help in a particular matter. And in this exchange, talking to a human being that had a conscience, feelings, compassion, would take personal ownership of your problem or whatever. Hey, we all know that was a dream that rarely happened. And I don't mean to sound cynical. I'm just telling you this is the way it's been my experience. So you try to elicit the help from this robot or machine or whatever, or an employee that has been trained so heavily that, for crying out loud, they may as well be a machine. I remember I was talking to an investment company, and this had to do with money. It was not a large amount of money. It was a modest amount of money, but it was modest enough and significant enough that it was worth my inquiring about it. And I remember calling this financial institution that, if I name their name, you would all know the name of the financial institution. It's one of the 3 or 4 largest financial institutions in the world. And they handle a lot of people's inheritance, unemployment insurance. I mean, they handle all kinds of retirement financial services. And they usually try to get you to invest in their favorite financial services, which usually, under many different names, it's usually them one way or another. So I realized that I called right. They close at 5 p.m. East Coast time. From the address they gave me on the telephone, I knew exactly what the building looked like because of where it was located. And being from Manhattan, I'm extremely familiar with some of the bigger buildings, what they look like, because some of the bigger buildings usually have these massive symbols with the name and symbol of the company on the outside of the building. Like, I don't know if it's true now, but for many years, AIG, I don't even know if they're still around. For many years, AIG had a prominently large building in LA, and you could see it from many different directions. Well, the same is true with many big cities and with places like New York City. So I knew exactly where this place was. It was one of the 4th largest companies in the world. And it was not a good move on my part to call in at 5 p.m. because obviously the employees are trying to get home. I understand that. And I have compassion, but I don't have compassion to the extent that I'm busy. My life is jam-packed with responsibilities. I don't have all the time in the world either. And I can appreciate the fact that you want to get home, but the only sparse few minutes that I could grab and free myself up during the day just happened to be at your closing time at around 5 p.m. So I made sure that I called, 10 minutes before 5 p.m. Now, I realize that it's cutting it close. And I also realize that when you try to call any job, any institution, any business, and when you try to call them at anywhere near their closing time, the chances are highly likely that nobody's going to answer the phone because they don't want to answer the phone. They don't want to get involved in somebody else's problem. Especially if it's Friday night. If it's Friday night, forget it, because they want to get out of there and go home. So it was Friday night. They wanted to get out of there and get home. And yet all I need is a couple of questions answered, and I was ready to give them the numbers that they needed. Okay, well, as expected, nobody answers the phone. And it's 10 minutes to the closing, which is at 5 p.m. So I call back again and I let it ring longer. And lo and behold, somebody actually answers the phone. Amazing. Because while you're listening on hold on the phone, as you know, you're barraged with all these baloney recorded messages about how much they care and how much your business means to them, and an on parade of baloney. Okay, because the behavior of the employees, which I can understand, is the exact opposite of the way you're being treated while you're waiting on the phone, which is you're a non-entity. You don't exist. So finally, I got a hold of a girl who was pleasant, willing to take some responsibility. And I assured her I would try to take care of this business as quickly as I possibly could. And I began to ask her 1 or 2 questions, which are absolutely necessary for us to finish the transaction. And I get kind of the stonewall treatment from her. And the verbiage or the words she's using towards me are word for word the exact same RoboCop repetition programming words that the answering machines and the previous employee gave me. I mean, word for word, whatever they were trained to say to customers, she just robotically repeated to me, which told me we were going to go nowhere fast. And at this rate, she was going to have to go, or the phones would be turned off, or I knew that the countdown was on, and very, very soon I was going to be disconnected with no hope whatsoever of reaching anybody in this massive corporation who cares for me, of course, as they tell me constantly through the recording. So hang in there for a minute. I want to tell you what happens next. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. This is Paul McGuire. Okay, so we start to do this, what I call the dance. And I recognize why she's saying what she's saying, because that's what she was told to say. So this, what I'm about to talk to you about, doesn't always work. In fact, it's a very high risk scenario to undertake, very high risk, because the chances are very great that this person is going to hang up on me. Okay, so be advised. But when you only have a couple of minutes and the likelihood is extremely high that you're going to end up listening to a dial tone, you figure, why not risk it? I really have nothing to lose. So I use a strategy that I use all the time, which is like, become radically, in a polite and very nice way, be as human and as real as you can possibly be to cut through the fog and indoctrination she's been programmed with. So I immediately turned my conversation towards her around on a dime. And I became as human, transparent, and vulnerable and sane and rational as I possibly could in the remaining X amount of seconds I had. I said, do you know what? I said, sorry for interrupting you. I said, but we can get this thing done really quick. But to save time, what you're telling me is word for word what the previous employee told me, and it's word for word what your recording is telling me. So I've already tried that and it doesn't work. Now, I know that you're trained to say particular words. I know that you're trained to handle customers in a particular way. So I don't fault you for doing what you're doing, because you're simply doing what you have, and excuse the words, you're simply doing what you've been programmed to do. And for whatever reason, she took a sigh of relief, because I guess it was because I wasn't pressuring her. I was being human. And I suppose it was because by being human, she was interpreting it as a kind of empathy being generated by me. Now, a lot of people are so hard-hearted. They're so locked in. They're so robotic. They're so programmed. They're like zombies, and you can't bring them back from the dead, nor should you try. But she was one of these vulnerable, open, secretly starving to be human and real individuals. So she opens up a little bit. I interpret that as progress, because it was progress. And then I said to her very quickly, I don't understand it. Just, I'm not going to tell anybody, but I said to her, are all of your employees trained to speak from the same script? I said, don't your managers and vice presidents and doesn't your corporation understand that people aren't stupid, and that they know when they're getting a memorized answer, they know when they're receiving a programmed answer, and they know when somebody is simply operating like a robot, because they've been told that's the way you're supposed to handle customers. And amazingly enough, she took another big sigh of relief. And then she spilled the beans, because she wanted to get home, and I kept assuring her that I wasn't going to keep her on the phone and just dominate her time, because I understood what she was going through, and I shared that. And so I said to her, I understand what it's like to work for a corporation that makes you say things to the customers, and you don't necessarily agree what you've been programmed to say, but you have to say it, and you have to say it the way your company wants you to say it. And, I think she was secretly longing for an excuse to be human, and she just seemed relaxed, and I wasn't there to exploit her. I was going for a higher goal, which is, you may think I'm crazy, and I really don't care. I don't mean to be conceited or obnoxious, but I don't care. My goal sometimes, my way of relating people and my way of witnessing is totally unconventional. And that's probably why I have these weird conversations with people, and the end game and the end result is a huge percentage of the people that I talk to, I'm able to lead to Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior, because I didn't start with a robotic, scripted approach, but I started with a transparent human exchange in which I tried to be real and I allowed her to be real. And I showed empathy, and I showed, hopefully, some compassion for her predicament. And that's true. A lot of people do get saved. Again, it's totally unorthodox. I've never heard any ministry anywhere even come close to teaching their people how to win people to Christ. Well, I would say number one, above everything else, don't treat anybody like a machine or a robot. Focus in on them, really listen to them, convince them by your actions that what they say is important to you, and then focus in on listening to what it is they want to talk to you about. And when you earn the right to speak to them, they will value you, they will respect you, and many times they will surprise you and reveal to you the fact that they're going through some kind of struggle, some kind of trial, some kind of burden that's very painful, and that they didn't mean to be rude or obnoxious, but they were simply following, quote, the orders that they were given. So it turns out this girl, once she was able to quickly, efficiently release the emotional burden she was carrying, she confided in me that the managers teach them like they literally follow a written script, a written playbook. And it's like one size fits all. And even though they blab a whole lot about how much they care about you as customers and they're there for you and all the rest of that, she said to me that really, she had not found that to be the case. That's just all mechanized language that they're taught to use. And she said, all the other employees are afraid of losing their job. And she said, it's not that I'm afraid of losing, it's not that I'm not afraid of losing my job. It's simply that, I try to do the best job that I can. And I try to abide by the company policies as best as I can. But she said, I got to be human. I got to be real, because I find that if I'm just talking to somebody and regurgitating or memorizing scripted words, that people will not open up or trust what I have to say. And I agreed with her, and I expressed empathy for her predicament. And then she said to me, a lot of the employees are afraid to get fired. And then she said, as you know from being in the working world, when it comes to New York City Friday night or Friday evening, everybody wants to avoid the long commute home. Everybody wants to leave in plenty of time to get home earlier at a decent hour. And everybody wants to, if they've had a hard work week and they want to get home to be with their families or whoever. And so I agreed with her and expressed that I understood that. And then she said, so people are don't take it personal. The people are not bad people. They're good people, but we are all under a lot of pressure here to deliver results. And I didn't say anything then, but I understood that. And it's odd, because when you're put under a lot of high pressure situations to produce certain results, unfortunately, the customer perceives it as unfeeling, robotic. The customer feels it as they're being pressured, and the company doesn't really care about the customer. And that only makes the problem worse. And she understood. So then she told me a couple of things confidentially. This didn't violate any disclosure agreement she had with her company. She didn't betray her company in any way. But she simply told me the truth in how I could solve my problem. Unfortunately, it would have to be on Monday, but she told me a way to get around the so-called gatekeepers. And then she shared with me a little trick that I could use that would get me to somebody who had the power to change things and the power to make a difference. And I wouldn't have to spend endless hours on the phone being shuffled from one department to another and being treated rudely. And so I wrote down quickly some notes on what I needed to do, who I needed to talk to. And most of all companies have the magic words that you got to use to open the doors that you need opened to get a response so that you can fix the problem. Every company has its own semi-secret interior language that if you use that language properly, doors will open and you can save yourself endless hours of headaches. So anyway, I thanked her. She thanked me. There was a sense of camaraderie. There was a sense of joy. And you may think I'm flat out nuts. I really don't care. But there was a sense of the Spirit of the Lord anointing the conversation. Now, why would that happen? Well, I just happen to think that the Spirit of the Lord anoints truth. And when you're conning and pressuring and badgering somebody, or if you're lying to somebody, and they never call it lying in the business world, they always have another word for it, that the Spirit of God, kind of withdraws from those dry atmospheres where the Spirit of God is being artificially contained. You know what I'm saying? You've all been there. So in our conversation in the last 60 or seconds more or whatever after that, there was a joy and a camaraderie that entered our conversation, and it was almost like the Lord blessed the conversation. And although I didn't accomplish what I wanted to initially accomplish, the mere fact that I had a pleasant, joyous exchange with another human being who was being forced to toe the company line, somehow, I can't tell you why, but it lifted my spirits. The conversation that I had with that employee lifted my spirits and filled me with joy. Now, I'll give you a potential scientific explanation as to how and why that might have occurred. As you know, modern science has discovered, especially quantum physics, has discovered that when we operate our minds, our bodies, our souls and spirits, our behavior and actions in a more loving way, like we choose to forgive somebody, we choose to let go of resentment, we choose to put our faith in God, we choose to express love and not hate or resentment. When we choose to operate within the laws of love or within the laws of higher spirituality, which means not being selfish, what some scientists have been able to measure is that in what is called the quantum field, which is a field that is in a different dimension. Within the quantum field, when we do things in the physical reality dimension that is good, positive, helpful, kind, caring, selfless, loving, things of that nature, when we do those things, when we speak according to those things, what we're doing, in effect, is shifting gears. And quantum physics scientists have been able to measure the numerical vibrational frequency that your body is always generating. So all the time, all day long, your body is generating a specific numerical quantum field resonation. And that resonation gets higher and higher and higher, depending upon how loving, how kind, how compassionate, how ethical, how fair you are living your life in. Okay? So if you're trying to adhere to true spirituality, you're going to resonate on a vibrational frequency that projects that higher level love frequency. If you're operating in a vibrational frequency zone of hatred, of racism, of vengeance, of getting back, of getting payback, of unforgiveness, of storing up resentment and anger, and if you're charging your body, brain, and spirit and your world with all kinds of hostile, negative, self-centered emotions, what will happen is your body will begin to transmit a far lower level vibrational frequency. Your body, soul, and spirit will begin to transmit a far more negative vibrational frequency or EMF frequency. And the positive spiritual frequency will cause you to be filled with joy, healing, happiness. The negative, dark, angry frequencies will cause you to be sick, vulnerable to disease, and susceptible to all kinds of evil energies coming into your life. I mean, it's amazing that science is or at least some branches of science are finally discovering this. So, in recent years, recent decades, and probably beginning in the 1800s, certain physicists and other scientists have discovered all kinds of electromagnetic frequencies that vibrate with a resonant frequency that has a specific numerical number attached to it. In addition, as we've said before, every single human being on planet Earth has a different individual electromagnetic frequency that they are transmitting from their heart, brain, body, and soul. So, and also every single one of us here on Earth, every single human being has his or her own specific EMF or electromagnetic frequency. So our very existence, our very capacity to live and inhabit our bodies and live in this physical world dimension is based on the fact that we are a specific numerical electromagnetic frequency. And the fact that people can talk to us and see us and we can interact with this physical dimension world is because we're kind of like holograms. Remember the way holograms work? A hologram is energy, content, and information that is radiating energy in another dimension. Okay? When the source of a hologram is radiating at a specific frequency in another dimension, it is transmitting information and content into our dimension. That transmission shows up as us, as individual people with individual names and certain characteristics like male and female and other things. So we are, in a real sense, beamed into this physical reality by a source of energy that exists in another dimension. And we materialize like a hologram. We materialize in this physical dimension with all our unique physical attributes. And it's miraculous, but it's scientifically true. In addition, every single person alive is here because they're the product of a resonant electromagnetic frequency that is being projected from a source dimension into this physical world dimension. Now, it even goes further than that. Remember how every single one of us has our own unique and individual fingerprints and thumbprints. Remember how every one of us has our own unique and individual retina scan or eye scan. So we can put our eyes up to a machine and it will notice that every single one of us has our own totally unique, individual, and different retina or eye scan. So in the same way, there's many different things that we're projecting into this physical world reality. That's the discovery of quantum physics. And so one of it is our unique being and identity, which is nothing more than the projection of a specific numerical frequency that is being beamed into this physical Earth dimension from another dimension. And so every one of us has our own unique and totally different electromagnetic frequency with its own unique and totally different electromagnetic frequency number. Every frequency range has its own number, just like if you go to the AM dial or the FM dial on your radio. So on the AM dial of the radio in like California, you have, for example, a Christian station that I used to be on years ago. And it was called AM. That was the bandwidth, AM 740. So I believe, and I'm not an engineer, I hope I'm communicating this to you accurately. I believe that whenever I was on this AM 740 radio station, that meant I was broadcasting the Paul McGUIRE show live 4 hours a day on the frequency of 740 hertz AM. Or on other stations, I would broadcast the Paul McGUIRE show on a particular number frequency, but it would be an FM frequency. FM stands for frequency modulation. That's a particular bandwidth. AM stands for, I believe it stands for amplitude or something like that modulation. I don't think I have the AM definition properly corrected. In any case, you hear my voice, you hear our station, you hear other voices, but what's creating the portal that allows the voices and the programs to be heard is a specific numerical AM or FM frequency. Everything is frequency. Your 5G cell phone, which can project and receive on a wireless basis videos, audios, and all kinds of stuff that you don't even know about. Your 5G cell phone picking up broadcasts from 5G cell towers allows you to send videos and pictures and audio via the various wireless technologies. And the primary two wireless technologies are the 5G wireless broadcast towers that have been erected everywhere, and they transmit a signal at a particular frequency range. And then you have a receiver of some sort, which is receiving at a particular frequency range known as 5G. Now, you need to pay attention to these things because knowledge is truth and truth is power. It's not quite as benign as it seems. So you need to know that originally, once upon a time in America, and I don't know what the current status is because the published current status is constantly changing, but once upon a time in America, the original purpose, once upon a time in America, of certain specific selected 5G technologies and frequency ranges, it was for military application. In other words, once upon a time, the 5G technologies, they were invented originally for the purpose of military applications. So they could beam an electromagnetic frequency at a certain numerical frequency range that would in a sense function as a death ray, function as a energy beam that could induce disease or sickness, often incrementally over an extended period of time. You could wipe out an enemy with a synthetic or artificial cancer. And then you have these massive installations around planet Earth that can transmit massive amounts of electromagnetic frequencies, both in the 5G range and both in the lower vibrational scale ranges. Now, what you need to know, there's one called HARP. HARP is a massive transmitter located in Alaska. And what it does is it aims its broadcast towers straight up into the ionosphere, and then it shoots electromagnetic frequencies in a particular spectrum up into the atmosphere, which causes the atmosphere to superheat, thus boiling the ions in the ionosphere. When you boil the ions in the ionosphere, you're in effect weaponizing the electromagnetic frequencies. Now, the two primary outcomes, among other outcomes from this technology, is that artificial weapons and artificial weather can be created with HARP-like weather modification technologies. Okay? So what you have originally, and I don't know what the current status is, originally what you had was potential usage for weather modification technologies. But it just so happens, ironically, that the same range of frequencies, when charged with electromagnetic frequency energy, can be used for an entire spectrum of things. So what you have is in this lower Hertz range of electromagnetic frequencies, you have two potential components. You have the potential of weaponizing it. You have the potential of intense weather modification or creating artificial weather. And by the way, this goes back like 40 years or more. No, I'm sorry. It goes back to the early 1940s. And this has been there's extensive documentation on this. This is not a secret. It was the reality of this was published openly. And so if somebody tells you that's crazy or whatever, they have no idea what you're talking about because it's been declassified, for crying out loud. If you look, you'll find it. Now, the other thing is, coincidentally, the same electromagnetic frequency ranges that allow for weather modification and weapons just happen to be the same quirky electromagnetic frequencies that can function in what's called scientific mind control. Now, I don't know if that's intentional. I don't think it is intentional. I think that's just there's parallel purposes potentially available in certain electromagnetic frequency ranges. So you can, hypothetically and theoretically, you can fire an EMF weapon, bounce it off the ionosphere, and potentially, hypothetically, create an epidemic of, let's say, anxiety or depression in Texas or Utah or wherever, hypothetically. You can hypothetically create extra heavy hurricane activity hitting Florida. You can generate an entire series of super powerful hurricanes using that frequency range. So there's potential hypothetical applications either in mind control or weather modification control. And you need to be aware of the existence of this. So when you're evaluating, you need to be very careful that you need to be in control of your thoughts. God has given you the mind of Christ. So you're supposed to renew your mind with the Word of God. You're supposed to be in control of your thoughts. And if you process and handle, let's just call it, such high voltage knowledge and information, and at the same time you fail to be a good steward over your mind, you could potentially experience all kinds of stress, anxiety, paranoia, and all kinds of stuff that you shouldn't be experiencing, because you shouldn't go into a zone of thinking and research and investigation if you're not mentally prepared for it, because it will not be good. So one needs to be wise and prudent before you stroll merrily into a wilderness of really weird stuff. You need to look before you leap. Okay, but the point is, these science fiction-like sciences and technologies exist. I've seen on the front cover of one of the largest military industrial global corporations in the world. This corporation is one of our big military industrial corporations. They're massive. They sell warfare technology to the U.S. military and other venues. I don't know where else they sell it. And right on the front cover, this is about 6 or 7 months ago. I don't know if it was the current cover or a past cover, but right on the cover of the sales magazine, the promotional magazine for this mega corporate globalist space technology company, space weapons technology company, was a promotional artwork which was staggering. It was a picture of this futuristic rocket plane. I mean, it's very hard to describe what it looked like. And it was a lifelike photograph or picture of space age technology in the form of what they said right on the cover of their magazine for their corporation, that this was a directed energy weapon, and it had a specific model number, and I don't remember the model number. And they were boasting of their directed energy weapon and how something to the effect that they were experiencing, a large amount of sales. And I don't think they were really specific on what this technology could do. I think it was somewhat general, but it was general, but not so vague that you couldn't figure it out. I mean, they did say it was a directed energy. They either said directed energy technology or directed energy weapon. I don't remember which. They may have very well said directed energy technology. The point is, when you read the description in the interior of the magazine, I mean, it doesn't take a fool to figure out that these are space-age science fiction-like weapons. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is that many years ago, as Dorothy said to Toto, her dog, she said those famous words, Dorothy, oh, no, that's the dog talking to Dorothy. It can't work that way. Sorry. So Dorothy says to Toto, the dog, we're not in Kansas anymore, which simply means, as you all know, the days of small town America and all the rest of that stuff is over. We are in the future. We are in a proverbial Oz, if you will. So the only way you're going to be able to deal with it and operate in it is you have to quit hanging on to past interior mental frameworks of the past, because all that's doing is causing you to throw out an anchor in a giant naval vessel, if you will. And every time you electrically lower the anchor into a vast area of sand, you don't secure the boat to the bottom of this area. You're not securing the boat. You're just dragging the anchor through the sand, and the giant naval vessel is moving slowly but surely, going a long distance, and eventually it's going to crash in to a beach, or crash into a docked boat, or God forbid, crashed into another commercial or naval vessel, causing extensive damage. So you can't, we're not in Kansas anymore. It means you have to turn up your mental game. You have to not only have knowledge, which gives you power, you have to be able to deal with the knowledge and the assimilation and processing of that knowledge at a far higher speed. If you're walking around in a state of shock and awe and dazed by what you see, it would be better off that you went and hid somewhere, because you're not doing anybody any good. Now, I want to take it to one further level. Everything basically we've been talking about so far has to deal with the reality of futuristic, high technology that, because of people's lack of knowledge, they don't believe that this technology actually exists. They believe that it's, that only could happen in the world of science fiction and science fiction-like technology. That is totally false. It's like, again, what Dorothy said to Toto: we're not in Kansas anymore. We are in the future, except the future happens to be right now. Now, the Bible says in the book of Daniel that in the last days, travel will increase faster and faster and faster, and knowledge will increase faster and faster and faster. So the prophet Daniel predicted supernaturally, for our benefit, that in the last days, and we're in the last days, that in the last days, knowledge would vastly accelerate and be distributed faster and faster and faster. And many of the things we falsely believed could never happen, or could never be invented, or could never exist in our particular timeline. Well, guess what? The fact of the matter is that a whole bunch of futuristic technologies and sciences have been very much invented in our timeline. And not only that, they're operational and they're in use right now. So where does that take us? Well, God didn't teach his people. He didn't predict for his people the reality of the prophet Daniel's prophetic warnings. When the prophetic warning of Daniel said that in the last days, knowledge will increase faster and faster and faster, it was not said to us to terrify us or to produce some state of psychological cognitive dissonance. No, not at all. God was giving us a heads up so that we could have time to come up to speed, to be prepared, to be trained, and to gain the knowledge that we need, to acquire the power that we need, to get up to speed and operate as victorious spiritual warriors in the last days, by not only understanding how to put on the full armor of God, not only understanding how to be clothed with power from on high, but the time has come for God's people to stop drinking the spiritual milk that the Apostle Paul warned us about. The Apostle Paul warned the church and its leaders, quit drinking milk as if you were an infant baby. The time has come for you to stop drinking milk like a diapered infant, Paul was saying. It's over. You're not an infant. You're not wearing diapers. Quit pooping in your diaper and crying for mommy to change it. You are now at an age where you've been given the mental faculties to change your own diapers, for crying out loud. So what may have been allowable when you were 1, 2, or 3 years old, I don't know how long that process goes on, what may have been allowable back then, the Lord is saying through the Apostle Paul to his church, you've outgrown that phase of your life. You're no longer an infant or a little child. And on top of that, The days of drinking milk are over. Milk is a watery, very nutritional substance, especially if it's mother's breast milk, because mother's breast milk, according to many doctors, contains all kinds of supernatural immunity agents. That's not me, that's medical researchers. But the point is, the Apostle Paul is saying that at a certain point in your life, it's time to stop drinking milk, even though milk is highly, highly nutritious. You need stronger food sources to build muscle, to have energy. You need to internally strengthen yourself with heavy protein when necessary. Your diet is something you got to change according to your needs and age. You need protein. You need vegetables. You need fruits, hopefully organic, to build a strong body and a strong mind. And you should not be eating processed, chemical infused foods. So the Apostle Paul is exhorting all true believers in Jesus Christ to stop drinking milk and to start eating meat, which means the meat of the word, the high protein, the steak or the fish, the salmon of the word of God. The Apostle Paul is saying you've got to change your diet because you're a spiritual warrior for Jesus. And the only way you're going to have the stamina and the intellectual power is you've got to change your diet from milk drinking to meat and potatoes and vegetables and fruits and fiber foods and all kinds of high, powerful, nutritional and protein-based foods. A balanced diet, of course. I'm not trying to cherry pick what you eat here. It should be a balanced diet, but there's something very wrong with your diet if you're subsisting on milk and you're, let's say hypothetically 27 years old. You're going to be amazing. You've seen, not all, many vegetarians are healthier than meat eaters and chicken eaters. I'm not knocking intelligent vegetarianism at all. But there are some vegetarians that cherry-picked what they were going to eat, and they ended up eating diets that didn't contain enough protein and other foods that contain essential vitamins. So this is just a small percentage of vegetarians. This percentage of vegetarians ended up being anemic, malnourished, weak, and were susceptible to all kinds of problems. That's not what the Apostle Paul is exhorting you to do. Again, you're supposed to use the mind of Christ. You're supposed to acquire knowledge, even in the area of your diet nutritional needs. Okay? But the point is, the Apostle Paul is raising up spiritual warriors and prophets in the last days, and they will not be able to fulfill their mission from God if they're not eating foods that contain nutritional health and nutritional power. I mean, it's common sense. It's a no-brainer. So you gain the knowledge and you obey God, even in the area of eating food. And one thing you can do, if you're going to choose a diet for nutritional reasons, protein reasons, health reasons, fiber reasons, whatever it is, I don't claim to be a nutritional expert at all, but one little clue that may help you. When you're going to eat foods that are going to make you healthy, make sure you like the taste of the food. Make sure you're going to desire to eat and consume whatever food you're choosing. Because if you choose a diet in which you hate the idea of the food you're going to eat, well, guess what? You already know what's going to happen. You will end up having a refrigerator filled with food that's going bad slowly because you bought stuff that was nutritional, but every time you think of eating it, you get sick to your stomach with the unpleasant memory of how awful it tasted. That is not going to be a win-win situation for you. And believe me, I have made that mistake more than once. I was shopping the other day on the internet, and I wanted to get more. Somebody was talking to me, and I'm always listening and evaluating what people are saying, because God will speak to you through all kinds of people. And this person, who was very knowledgeable in the area of diet, was telling me that my protein intake was way too low, and I should have known better. So I listened to this individual, and I immediately went out. I mean, the next day I got some good protein, but I made a fatal mistake. The two mistakes I made were, number one, the ordinarily good protein shake that I bought really didn't contain as many grams of protein as I needed. And I was trying to get a deal, okay? Well, when you save a penny and you lose $10, there's an expression which I can't remember, but you're so concerned about the small savings that you miss the big picture, which I did in my decision. So I ended up buying a protein shake where I would have to drink twice the amount of this protein on a regular basis to get the minimal protein amounts that I needed. Well, there's no way I'm going to just drink down these endless amounts of shakes. I should have bought the protein shake mix which contained the proper amount of protein, because I would have saved money in the long run, and I would have gotten plenty of protein without having to drink protein all day long, which didn't save me any money at all. And then, you know what? I bought 8 bottles of it because there was a quantity discount. Not a good move, because I didn't like the taste of it. I should have tasted it somewhere at some time. I didn't like the taste of it. It tasted like, just imagine if you threw some halfway decent vanilla protein shake mix into a blender and some fresh fruits, organic fruits or whatever. That sounds halfway decent, right? But then the mistake I made was the main substance of the protein was made from hemp. No, I wasn't trying to get high on marijuana. That's not the point. The point is the hemp supposedly has a powerful way of detoxifying your body from heavy metals and all kinds of poisons and stuff like that. All sounds good, right? Yeah, but there's one major problem. The shake, when you blended it up, and I know how to blend up a shake that tastes good, but using this protein shake source as the primary component, my instant reaction was yuck. I couldn't stand the taste of it. So what good is this healthy, nutritional, protein-rich shake going to do me? It's not going to do me any good at all. We will eventually drink it when we run out of food, or we stop going to the grocery store and we're desperate. Then we'll get around to drinking it. But I can't tell you, I have done that often enough that I should have known better. You don't save money in a small amount just to lose money. You got to be very careful, because there's a lot of people that I meet. They have a mentality, a mindset, a programming that was built in them since childhood, and they think they're being prudent. They think they're being good stewards, but in actuality, they're being foolish, and they're not doing the best things for themselves. But in their mind, initially starting out, they're convinced they're doing the right thing. Okay, so bottom line, the Apostle Paul is telling us to fortify ourselves by eating mature adult nutritional foods that have protein and nutritional substance to them. Because why? You're a spiritual warrior. And then the other thing is, you need to be aware of the fact that all around you, there are people thinking that, what you're saying is not true. What this guy is saying is not true. Because of their ignorance, because of their lack of study, because of their lack of knowledge, because they are not readers, they don't study, they don't examine, they don't think for themselves. That all adds up to an equation formula, which is called stupidity. Everything I'm talking about can be documented from firsthand scientific, technological sources. None of it is whoop-de-doo. I saw this very strange object in the sky the other day. Okay, you heard me talk about it, I think. And the only reason I saw it is I was videotaping chemtrails, because it is so blankingly obvious what a chemtrail looks like versus a normal jet exhaust trail. They're two entirely different things. And if you're such a bozo on the bus that you can't visually distinguish between a polluted, bad for your health chemtrail and a normal jet exhaust, if you can't tell the difference visually, there's something wrong with your perception abilities. There really is, because only an idiot couldn't tell the difference between the two. So I'm looking at, I'm videotaping chemtrails, but there's a quirk in my camera. Most likely it's because I'm not pressing the right button. It doesn't seem like when I zoom in from a super far distance that I'm really recording what I want to. So I see this reflecting object way, way, way up in the sky. And I've seen drones, and I've seen jets of all kinds, and I've seen military jets of all kinds, and I've seen rockets of all kinds. In fact, I forgot what it's called, but I live up on a very elevated area, and it's this famous. It's either a Navy or Air Force, like, proud of the Navy or Air Force thing. What they do is they launch 5 high-powered jets that are lined up in a complete synchronization. So 5 high-powered jets are flying, figuratively speaking, like arm in arm. And they're in these 5 super powerful jets are like in military formation. And it is so impressive. Plus, it scares you somewhat because it represents awesome power. And I'm standing in my backyard overlooking a valley. And I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm watering part of the land because I want these flowers to grow. In any case, somebody shouts from the interior of the house, look outside, look outside. And fortunately, thank God, I look up immediately. I don't know why I looked up immediately, but I look up immediately and there's these 5 jets, like in perfect formation, flying at a massive speed, not that many feet above my house. I mean, a little carelessness on the part of the pilots, and they could have ripped the roof off. So these 5 jets are like, wham, like faster than anything I've ever seen. And they're like so close to the roof of my house. And then they move out across the valley in elegant high speed, these 5 jets. And there's a name for that particular 5 jets, and there's a name for that particular formation because it's done at football games and all kinds of national events, and it is super impressive when you're that close to the jets in flight. And I was just blown away. I mean, and I've seen a lot of stuff. It was just so impressive. And the might and power that you feel that's contained in the precision maneuvering of these jets is incredible. Okay, so I've seen all those things. So what's up there the other day, I can't figure out what it is. It's way out there. It's very large. It's reflecting light. I can't put my finger on it and I've seen everything under the sun. I've seen I forgot what they're called. They're the weird black jets that can fly in weird formations, and there's a name for them, and I forgot the name. I've seen those fly near the rocket plants quite often. Okay, so I'm noticing, and I'm zooming in to try to videotape it for you to see. But for whatever reason, the zoom is not capturing this thing, even though it's massive in size. So just because I can't figure out what it is, my mind does not go on autopilot and decide to categorize it as an alien spacecraft. Sorry, folks. If you have a brain, you use it. You process the visual information. You don't jump to some dumb conclusion just because you can't figure out what it is that's floating out there. And so, if it was a spacecraft, at least in my opinion, there's various criteria that it would have had to have had visually exhibited for me to lean in that direction, and it didn't. It was somewhat like a clone, but unlike any clone I'd ever seen before. And it wasn't a jet of any kind. It wasn't a chemtrail jet. It wasn't a normal jet trail jet. It wasn't military jets of any kind. So I just put it in the file in my brain that I'll have to wait and figure it out sometime in the future with more information. But like I said, even though I couldn't figure out what it was, I can't remember how many hours later, and I can't remember I don't know at this point whether the hours later would preclude it from being what it may have been, or sealed the deal of it being what some people said it was. So I'll get right to the point. I think it was in the middle of the night at this time. Yeah, it was in the middle of the night because it was dark out. I heard this boom in our house, and it sounded like somebody was breaking in. Now, I said part of this the other day. This just didn't come from paranoia from nowhere or the Twilight Zone. There was a robbery spree going on in our neighborhood. Welcome to California. At the same time, I heard this thunderous boom like somebody was breaking in. Okay, we were in the middle of an actual robbery spree in our neighborhood. So, as I'm lying awake in bed, I'm trying to process what it is. The closest I can process it is, it sounds like when a dog I was taking care of was running full speed ahead and banged her head into the glass sliding doorway to the into the backyard. It sounded like it was a lot louder than that, but it sounded something like that. Or when other animals have run into the glass sliding door in the back. Or when I have moved quickly and banged my head in the glass sliding door in the back. That's what it kind of sounded like. But I inspected the house and took proper precautions and preparedness with what I traveled with, which is both light and, whatever you need to make sure you're safe. And I go through a whole routine to check everything out because I don't want to be surprised. So I couldn't find anything in our location. It could have been another location. Anyway, forgot about it. But the next day, somebody posts on the internet that they heard a loud boom in their house. This is a couple of miles from where we live. They heard a loud boom in their house. They thought they were getting broken into, but then they heard that the boom they heard, which they assumed was somebody breaking into their house, was in fact, according to the media and police reports, it was the space shuttle. It was SpaceX returning from its mission and descending upon the Air Force base out there in the Mojave Desert. So yeah, I did hear a boom, but it wasn't a break-in boom. It was a boom generated by a SpaceX rocket descending back to Earth. Okay, so what's the point? The point is, knowledge is power. You have to accumulate knowledge, exercise your rational abilities, your praying abilities, and then as you quantify and process the information, then you will have the guidance you need. But if you're clueless, like most people in America, and like a massive percentage of the people in the Christian church, and I don't mean to be unkind, in my heart, my motivation is to wake these people up with your help so that their lives will be spared. That's my motivation. My motivation is love. And for my willingness to put my love in action, to risk a lot that you will never know about in order to put love in action. My reward most often for putting love in action is being attacked, is being called names, is attempts at ridicule, which, by the way, always fail because my ducks are in a row. So, and I am deplatformed from major search engines for what crime? For attempting to communicate the truth and love so that people's lives can be spared, their children can be spared, and that they will have a future worth living in. And I speak the truth in love, and I speak it factually. And for that, I'm not going to play a violin for you. I'm not looking for sympathy. So there's going to be no violin playing at the end of the Paul McGUIRE report. You wouldn't want to hear me play the violin anyway, because I took the violin. I had to for public school, to graduate. I had to. They wouldn't let me play a guitar. They wouldn't let me play the drums. So I got stuck with the violin, which I hated. And naturally, my ability to play the violin expresses my hatred for it. So I'm not about the violin. I'm about saving people's lives. And I think if you love people, you're about saving people's lives, which many of you are. And I thank God for each and every one of you. Together, we can change the world. But we need to do it with knowledge, which gives us power and guidance, and to be constantly aware of technologies and spiritual developments, which God is downloading to us right now, even as we speak. And if we would receive these things, we would find out that God has given us everything we need to be more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. God bless you. This is Paul McGUIRE. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.